Hello guys, Louis Dangoor here from WrestleTalk.com, and I'm here with Alex McCarthy from TalkSport. Alex, how you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm very good, thank you. How about yourself? I'm too hot, actually, but I'm all right.
It's hot. It is hot here. It is hot.
As you can tell by our complexions, Louis, this is not meant for us, is it? It's not.
It's not. It's not. It really isn't. We're not built for the heat. But so we're here today for a bit of a different one, actually. So normally this retro review goes on to Fightful Select, the subscription service, which everyone should 100% be subscribed to, by the way. Sean pretty much breaks news there on a daily basis. Just today, he's done one on an Impact contract and a bit of an exclusive on that. He breaks a lot of stuff. There's retro reviews on there, tons predating this one. There's backstage reports, there's Q&As, there's a whole lot. So if you're not subscribed to Fightful Select, that's fightfulselect.com, make sure you are, because it is well worth your money. And so we thought we'd come on today and do this as a bit of a, I guess, preview and a bit of a showcase for some of the content you can get on Select. So for people... Exactly, a hook. So for people that aren't familiar with this concept, the way it works is we review the pay-per-view that took place on this month 20 years ago. So Unforgiven 2000. We started last month with SummerSlam 2000. And what's interesting about this is I was just less than a month old at the time of this pay-per-view, and Alex was about 36. So we watched this from the perspective of me, someone who has watched it but didn't have that sort of nostalgic feeling watching it because I wasn't watching at the time, and Alex, who was. And I think we enjoyed the first show, didn't we?
Yeah, definitely, man. And I'm always interested, like, because for me, it was like the height of my fandom, like what made me fall in love with wrestling. Whereas for you, you might not have seen every Raw and SmackDown in and around these pay-per-views to know like all the little things like that. One thing that really popped me when I watched this pay-per-view, and there wasn't that much that popped me, but one thing that did was Joe, like Just Joe, delivering some news to Steve Austin. And if you'd been watching Raw and SmackDown in the weeks up to that, he was just like this little gossiper backstage, and I'd totally forgotten about him, totally forgotten that they even did anything with him, and he'd done stuff with Triple H, and there he was getting beaten the crap out of by Steve Austin. So it's just little things like that, man, little gems.
Yeah. And it's like watching back, seeing how hot the crowd were for the smallest things that you think, they weren't that hot. But then even my brother walked in today and I was watching right at the main event. He was like, the crowd are hot. And I'm like, yeah, they are. That's what you miss. But
I think it's weird. It's weird when you like I said, like, I grew up in the era, and then kind of in the last decade or so, you then compare, or like, because it does feel different. You expect it to be a certain way. So when there is a hot crowd now, and I always feel this is the case too, it makes a major difference when their crowd is hot. Like it can make any angle seem so much more significant. I think back then we took it for granted almost.
Yeah, and I mean it's. I mean, definitely in the era we're living in now, if I can get any sort of crowd noise, I'll take it. But so we're live on YouTube, obviously. So if you guys have a question about the show, about our wrestling fandom now, or even Alex's at the time and his feeling, get your super chats in. Any dollar amount gets your question and or statement read out, and we'll go through them as they come in. So as we mentioned at the top, Unforgiven 2000, pay-per-view before was SummerSlam 2000, which if you want to check out our thoughts, head on over to Fightful Select. What were your feelings at the time, Alex? Do you remember watching this pay-per-view or watching the Raws or SmackDowns that either preceded or came after it?
I mean, I always watched the Raws and SmackDown in that era. Like, I never missed any. But the main thing I remembered about this pay-per-view was that it was Austin's return, right? Like, that was the main thing. So my gran recorded it for me, and I caught it the next day, and I actually watched it before I went to school because I was just desperate to see Austin. Like, you know, it's hard to fathom that now. I guess the only thing comparable is how I kind of feel that way about Reigns at the moment. I want to see what he's doing on SmackDown, but this was like another level. So in terms of like the matches though, like I remember Angle and Triple H, like I thought their feud culminated around here. Like, if I had to take a stab in the dark, I would have said Unforgiven. I could not remember the four-way main event at all.
Yeah.
That seemed just like a filler of sorts. I remember the Jericho and X-Pac feud as well. There was just, you know, there's a lot of things on that show that are just kind of there. But there was like a few a few feuds and rivalries that did kind of culminate in a bit of a spectacular way, but then most of them carried on anyway. So it was rare. Like now, sometimes when there's a WWE B pay-per-view, I hate that term, but B pay-per-view.
Yep.
Back then, this is probably what that would have been on the calendar, and I don't think it's hard to argue that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And obviously, we'll get on to talking about it because as you alluded to earlier, this was a bit of a meh show, if I had to call it anything. So we kick things off with, right. So for those who don't know, I'll run down sort of what happens in the match very quickly, and then we'll give our thoughts. So to kick things off, we had Right to Censor defeating the Acolytes and the Dudley Boys. It went about just over 6 minutes. Bradshaw tripped over a light on his way down to the ring, which made me laugh because it's Bradshaw. But so the match was made after Right to Censor attacked the Acolytes on SmackDown, and then Too Cool and the Dudley Boys made the save. So they opened the show Right to Censor at SummerSlam as well, but they've added Val Venus to the group since the last pay-per-view. I think they're actually a great group to get the crowd riled up to start things off when they come out, and it's a good heat, very sort of heel heat seeking group. That probably a good thing to get sort of your baby faces over. Stevie Richards got a pre-match promo saying that they're going to defeat these quote disgusting teams. So he didn't tag him for the entire match, just interfered on the outside. The early stages sort of featured a bit of action for everyone coming in to do their stuff. And then Devon was isolated for a portion before Bubba made the hot tag. Bull Buchanan did this really great jump onto the top rope and then drop kick to Bradshaw. It was quite seamless.
That was like his it was like his signature. He did that a fair amount. Yeah. He was very agile for the big man that he was.
Yeah, it was a bit like, oh wow, okay, fair play. And then it was like the crowd was certainly not behind Venus, which I think was just exactly what he wanted. Dudley Boys hit a Doomsday's device on him, and then the Godfather made the save. Steven Richards runs in, blasts Bubba Ray with a super kick, and then as the referee's back was turned, Val Venus picked up the win. This was, in terms of the match, we'll obviously get on talking about the post-match afterwards. Match was fine. It wasn't great.
It was there.
It was just there, yeah.
I mean, from my perspective, I thought that the commentary put over really well how kind of what a dangerous team Dudley's and APA were. Like, you look at them and you expect some carnage, and the fans really want to see the Right to Censor get that carnage. So the formula is there, and I thought in this era, WWE booked Right to Censor really well. It's not often that they actually give a heel-seeking mid-card stable like this actually the momentum that they gave. I mean, what ends up happening? They all have some kind of title reigns, and they have the tag belts for a while. They were scoring results like this on the regular, and in this day and age, heel teams, heel stables, you saw it with like Andrade and Garza and people like that. Like they just drop a lot of losses. I think it was well done, and then you give the fans what you want after, right? Like what the people have come for.
Yeah, so as Alex was alluding to, after the match, we had Steven Richards get hit with the diving headbutt from the top rope. So the babyface can get the heat back. Then there's a bit of a schmoz with them and the Acolytes and everyone, basically. The Acolytes clear all of the other Right Censor members out of the ring. They all attack Steven Richards, put him through the table. It was, as you say, there. We got both teams sort of getting what they needed. I think Val Venus picking up the win in his first pay-per-view Right to Censor match was probably a good idea. And then the babyfaces get the heat back to sort of start the show on the right foot, I guess. But this match, gone.
No, I was just about to say, you're right. It's an easy win, right? You want to get the crowd hot, so you annoy them, and then you get to put the bad guys through the tables, give you what you want when you pay to see the Dudleys at that time. So, man, I mean, like you said, it's not blowing the roof off. It's not taking any melts of star ratings or anything like that. Yeah. But it did what it was supposed to do, I think.
I mean, it didn't even get a star. It got less than a star rating from Dave, so that's that. Boo Dave, exactly. After the match, we had Stephanie McMahon backstage. Happy birthday, by the way, Stephanie. Not for today, and it was her birthday on the day of the pay-per-view. She said she's worried about Triple H's injured ribs. Triple H promises to end Kurt Angle. She apologizes to him and says she was wrong to think that Kurt was her friend. Steph says that she supports him. And then we get Kevin Kelly backstage waiting for Stone Cold Steve Austin. Both of these, like we saw with SummerSlam, long running angles playing out through the show. And then the next match we got was Taz and Jerry Lawler, which was the only sort of straight rematch from SummerSlam. And thank God we got it, because damn, this was a great match.
You think it was great?
It was awful.
I was literally like, hang on a minute. So I mean, a strap match by its very notion is kind of convoluted and terrible. I think The Rock and Triple H had a half decent one once, but other than that, I can't really recall any that I thought were great.
I think Bryan and Wyatt had one, and it was decent, because it wasn't that touch four corners rubbish.
Well, this is what I mean. If you have the original rules as it was, even though that's not really how this one ended, so
no,
peculiar. But anyway, judge when it was that way, and you had to do it with the four sides of the post. It's just a weird concept, really, that doesn't solve anything. And this feud, I think Jerry Lawler is. I don't think anyone looks back on it favorably. I remember JR talking. I listened to not Something to Wrestle, obviously not. Grilling JR, right? And he was talking about SummerSlam 2000, and they were talking about this angle, and he wasn't happy about it at all. And he said that no one involved really was. Did it really help Taz? No, but of course, at the end of it, we get the debut of Raven. We're in Philadelphia, ECW country. So again, did it serve its purpose? I guess. Was it great? Not really. I mean, when Raven hits the ring, it was pretty cool. The way the crowd get into it, and it's always nice to see a surprise debut. I just thought the match itself, how they got there as well. Like, I don't know. It was just a filler thing, and I don't think Jerry the King Lawler needed to be in that feud with Taz. And I just look at it. I think, who did it really help in the end? And the answer is no one.
Completely agree. I mean, so we'll sort of run through what happens in the match. Taz takes control early, chokes Lawler out in front of the commentary team with the strap. But JR tells him sort of that they're trash talking between each other, which I did like, to be fair. I thought that played over there. It wasn't just between Taz and Lawler. JR was involved in the feud as well. King took control early, took control afterwards, choked Taz and whipped him with the strap. Taz no-sold the pile driver twice, which was just, I mean, I don't know if it's just because we don't see pile drivers on WWE TV a lot, but whenever I see one, I always pop and I'm like, damn, yeah. And then he just popped up and I was like, okay. And then he hit a second one and he just popped up again. And then he hit a third one and he popped up and I was like, oh, it's getting silly now. But then as soon as Taz
fell down,
I was like, all right, it's quite funny.
I mean, it's fine if that's the way they're going to present him. Like, and he was like this wrecking machine, and but then it never went anywhere, did it? It was just a spot.
Exactly. Lawler taps three of the corners, which you've already spoken about, is not the best use of the strap match and how it should end in our view. Taz stops him before he can get to the fourth, as I think everyone could have predicted. The ref bump as Taz accidentally clocks the referee. Raven turns up, as we spoke about, and hits Lawler with the DDT. Taz then makes him pass out with the Taz mission. Taz refused to let go. I mean, as you said, it kind of did serve its purpose in the sense that the crowd were really hot for Raven's debut. And it was in Philadelphia. So I guess, did it serve its purpose? Yes. Was it anything special? By no means. Any other thoughts or comments coming out of that one?
Yeah, I've got a whole doctrine of comments on this one. No, again, you just summed it up, perfectly. Really, if it was there just to get Raven to debut, cool. But I think, like you said, you could have literally just watched the finishing minute or so and been fine. Yep,
completely agree. After this one, we had Stone Cold returning for the first time in 10 months, which was great. Massive pop from the crowd. Kevin Kelly asked him how he's feeling. He says he won't be asking any questions today. Won't be answering any questions today, but will be the one asking them. He then attacks Kevin Kelly, and we get Michael Cole replacing JR on commentary following the Taz match.
That was dreadful, by the way. Just to chime in here, Michael Cole and JR were a bad pair here, in my opinion. It didn't obviously the flow between JR and the King is like legendary and it just works perfectly. But then I did like Cole every now and again was like trying to do King-esque color things, and I think it was like it might have been the Eddie Guerrero China match. I think maybe Guerrero and Rikishi, but China was there, and I think JR insinuated that Guerrero cared more about the belt than China, and Michael Cole tried to offer some kind of counter, well, no, you can't say that. Obviously defending the heel, but he just did it terribly, and you can't blame him. It's not his role, but at the same time, you got two play-by-play guys out there. It just felt really off. I noticed it a lot when I was watching it, and I don't think obviously at the time I would have, but just going back, I was just like, man, this flow is not right. And that's JR, by the way, in his prime. He was on fire. The close of the show, I know we'll get there. Awesome calls from him. But he didn't jive with Michael Cole the way he did with Jerry King Lawler. I mean, but that's not really a shameful thing for Cole. It just wasn't his role.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, right, let's do this. Ideal commentary team
ever.
What just any combination of people. Who are you going for? You can have a 3-man, a 4-man, a 2-man. What you want? Who's your commentary team?
I've never really understood how things have graduated to the 3-man team. I don't, all when I was growing up, I really loved the pairing of Cole and Taz, and I like the pairing of JR and King. Made all the sense in the world to me. I've never understood why we needed the third wheel. But I think my favorite of all time is JR and the King, just because both in their primes, like when King, obviously it doesn't age well, a lot of King and his puppy stuff, right? No. And there's something on this pay-per-view that I'll get to that didn't age well either. But when I think about just the dynamic between the two and the balance, King was so good at
being King.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, the way he would defend the heels and kind of almost, and you knew it was absurd. I remember being so frustrated as a kid at some of the things he would say, and you knew it was really absurd. But at the same time, he said it with such horrible, arrogant belief that you kind of believed that he believed that. So I thought he was so good in that role, and then you'd have JR that played off that fantastically. I still think JR is the best play-by-play guy there's ever been. So yeah, I mean, for me, probably just the 2-man team of that. I can't think of a team I've enjoyed more at the desk. And if I could chuck some Mojo in there, I would.
I mean, I've got to go for Nigel and Moro in NXT. I mean, Moro just, I think he's fantastic. He'll be a big miss for NXT. But I'm actually just going to mention this comment here from A16 Adam Walker, who says, with this being WrestleTalk and TalkSport, can we now call this review Talk is Fightful? Well, I was actually just going to use this to plug. You're doing some stuff for the WrestleTalk magazine now, aren't you? As well as Sean. So do you want to give us a little insight about what you're going to be doing there?
Oh, so we're going to use the Fightful platform to plug our stuff. All right. No,
your stuff. It's your stuff.
Yeah. No, I do. I am. I write for the print magazine of WrestleTalk at the moment, basically doing all the news. I think the news editor of the magazine is what I'm being coined. So I'm told. So that's cool. To be in print. I haven't been in print since I was 7-8 years ago in regional papers. So that's pretty cool to do that with wrestling. And there might be some cool stuff coming up, as you will know, Lou. But we're not ready to really talk about that yet. So we're not. Keep your eyes peeled, though.
Yeah. And as I said earlier, we're obviously live. So any super chats, you want questions, comments, anything of that nature, read out on the show, let us know, and we'll be more than happy to answer. So next we got the Hardcore Battle Royal, which was Steve Blackman, Al Snow, Crash Holly, Funaki, Perry Saturn, and Test. So the rules of this, basically, for those that aren't familiar, is whoever's the champion at the end of the 10 minutes is the winner of the match and the champion. It's the same rules as the WrestleMania 2000 match.
It's like a championship scramble.
That's what it is. I don't hate it. I don't hate the rules.
I don't mind it. I mean, we've had a few championship scrambles down the years. I can't remember what pay-per-view they used to do it on now. But we have had it with the world title a few times, and I don't mind it. And I think for the hardcore title, especially with a lot of chaos, it's fine. Like, I mean, for this match especially, you look at who's in Al Snow in his Italian get-up, popped me.
Hilarious.
He was so kind of underrated, I think, and comedy-wise as well. And when I think about, I was just about to say when I think about Head. When I think about Al Snow with Head, and obviously I think I said this at SummerSlam, as a kid, I didn't comprehend what the joke was there. Like, obviously I do now, but like back then, I just thought it was like a mannequin head and it was just a bit weird. And when you watch it now, years later, and JR's like, oh, Al Snow just gave Terry head. And like the way they say it, you're like, oh man, like that sucks. Like you just know the jokes are so like blatant and in your face. And there was loads of them in this match because Head got used a fair amount. But I will say, the one thing I looked at in this match, and I always rated him. I rated Steve Blackman, by the way. Always rated Test. I thought
knew you were going to say that.
Test never hit his ceiling, man. He never did, and it's obviously such a shame that he's not with us anymore. But when you look at him here, man, he had the look. He was great, a mover in the ring, great size. He was jacked, and maybe the only thing he really lacked was the charisma on the microphone. But man, they could have worked around that. They should have worked around that.
Yeah, I mean, I've literally my third note for this match is Test at a place could have been a real star for the company. He looked at a place with just how big he was, how just looks like a Vince guy, sort of person that Vince would have loved. But on the note of the head jokes, you were saying, thank God, thank God Lawler wasn't on commentary because that would have been Overdrive. As you mentioned, Al Snow kept up his gimmick of coming out as a gimmick dressed as someone from a European country. He'd been Spain in the past. He was Italy, obviously, as European champion. Match starts, Crash Holly running at Steve Blackman, blasting him with a super kick, then hitting a diving Perry Saturn with the trash can lid. Crash Holly hit a scary Hurricane Rana from the top rope and Al Snow that didn't look great in the slightest. And then I'm going to jump to about 6 minutes in because there just was a whole lot of nothing. 6 minutes in, Test hit Steve Blackman with a big boot to the trash can. Crash Holly then hit Test over the head with the trash can lid and pins Test on the outside to become the champion, which was fine. Crash then runs up the ring with the title, intercepted by Perry Saturn, who hits him with the trash can lid and becomes a champion for himself. There was a lot of brawling through the crowd, and Test sold going hit over the head with a pizza box.
I nearly said this when you said about you were just reading Al Snow and the way he came out, and I nearly said that I thought it was just dreadful that he sold that. But they were selling getting hit with popcorn and all sorts later on. So yeah, it was something.
There it was. Chris Duncan, by the way, has said that it was Unforgiven that did the championship scramble. So spilling out of this pay-per-view, I guess.
There you go, yeah.
We should have probably figured out.
Tradition, sure.
So with about a minute to go, Steve Blackman was stalking Perry Saturn, hits him with a kendo stick to become the hardcore champion. Everyone then attacks Blackman on the ramp as the clock runs down. Everyone tries to go for the pin. This match was a whole lot of nothing, really. It was fine. There were some nice spots, but nothing great. It didn't feel as big time as the hardcore title match between Shane McMahon and Steve Blackman at SummerSlam, which wasn't an amazing match, that one, but it still felt more sort of big time and like a big pay-per-view title match. This didn't have that buzz for me in the slightest. How about yourself?
No, yeah, I agree. And I mean, you mentioned the Hurricane Rana spot. That was terribly botched. He could have literally landed on his neck really, really badly there. But other than that, it was just a lot of, like you said, brawling. And it's often the case with this. It's just getting to the home stretch and where they know what they've got to do. And obviously, Blackman wins. And then there's like an awkward amount of time left on the clock. Like, not enough where you can just wind it down and it's like dramatic, but too much where you can't just not do anything as well. So they end up doing this like bit on the outside where everyone's just trying to pin him, which, I guess makes sense. It's fine. But it just felt like a bit of an anticlimax to the lead in to the last pinfall. So I think the thing with the hardcore title match that I've always taken from it as long as it's kind of entertaining and easy to watch, which it is because the pace is so frenetic, I'm always down for it. I always liked it. And to me, you know, for instance, you couldn't judge it by the same criteria that Dave Meltzer would give star matches to other things, because it's not going to be a Matt Classic or overly layered in storytelling. It's about the hardcore title, about the spots. It's meant to be fun. And if you come for that with that mindset, you'll be entertained. And generally, I was. Yeah. This is an easy watch.
Yeah, it as you say, it wasn't offensive, which I guess we'll take the wins where we can.
That's a perk. That's a perk. Yeah.
It is. After this match, we had Kurt Angle backstage showing off his gold medal, which just will never not be funny. He's somehow in better shape now than he is in 2000. Have you seen that video of him with the milk?
I wrote recently? It up. Yeah, I wrote it up for TalkSport. That's how impressed I was.
He ripped.
He looks ridiculous. Having said that, in about 2001, he gets in like ridiculous shape again. Yeah. Like he's got abs for days. But yeah, I mean, you got to remember the thing about Angle, and everyone says this. It's not only about how quickly he picked up the business, but like he is legit. He is like as tough as they come. Everyone will tell you that. And the guy is tough as nails. And you look at him, and he is just like a brick house, isn't he? So he's not the kind of guy you want shooting on you. I'll tell you that much.
I completely agree. And I mean, something we'll talk about this here because it's to do with Angle, and it's to do with just the way they booked comedy at this time. For me, they had a great knack of being able to book top guys in comedy and funny angles without devaluing them. To the point where it's something that I think is missed now, because it gives a light-hearted edge, shows a different side. And then when these top stars do go into like sort of super serious mode, it accentuates that. And I think that's missed in wrestling now. Like, I can't remember the last time something genuinely really funny happened in a top WWE title feud. Yeah,
which is probably fair. You got to remember back then they had Brian Gewirtz, right? Who is now the Rock's guy. And he was just a tremendous writer. He did a lot of Edge and Christian stuff, of course, The Rock, and many more beyond that. And eventually he would become basically the head writer of Raw. So having his genius obviously helps. And he's a very funny guy if you ever like to see what he tweets or anything like that. So I think that plays a part in it, right? Because you've got lots of naturally funny superstars. Like R-Truth is a funny guy, right? Even what he did with a Kit Kat last night somehow entertained me. And you take that, but the stuff that was written, even like the interactions here between Angle and Austin, I thought Angle was just brilliant considering how there wasn't even a year in the business. The way he's so like corny and like you're ridiculous, he's just fantastic. Like I was cracking up at where they were like, you know, I heard Austin kicked your ass. He was like, no, he didn't. And then later on, he goes, I can't believe Austin kicked my... No, he didn't kick my ass. Like, he keeps, like, catching himself. It was making me laugh. He's just because it was him. He's so good at doing it. But I think when it comes to, like, you know, Foley, for instance, he's another guy who's really good at doing that and had some freedom, and him and Triple H would spitball, and even their little interaction was kind of entertaining. So it's got a lot to do with the talent, but the writers are very important. And I guess that ultimately... especially in today's world where only so few people have leverage to say what they want, it's going to make a difference.
100%. So we had Stone Cold Steve Austin running into him backstage. Angle extended hand and said it was a pleasure to meet him. Obviously, because I think an important thing to know, Angle's real rise came when Austin was off TV, which kind of, thinking about it, made me, and I still do, think he should have been the one responsible for running him over, because you think about who benefited the most from Austin being off TV, and it was Angle. So I like that, and it was sort of alluded. Then we had because Angle said it was too late for him to win his own, so he offered Stone Cold Steve Austin an honorary gold medal for his comeback. Austin said he was going to shove that medal, store that medal in a special place right up his ass, and then attacked Kurt Angle. This was just as we said earlier,
up his ass. Yeah,
right up his ass. Funny stuff that didn't take away from it. And it wasn't that corny, goofy comedy. Like, I mean, I don't want to, well, you know what, draw comparisons on Raw over the last couple of weeks when they've had Randy and Drew do those sort of pictures of the people that they've hit their finishes on in the hospitals. Like, stuff for me, that's not that funny. But this is. So I don't think it's to say you can't have comedy in your top feuds. It's just make it funny. Shouldn't be that hard.
Well, yeah, it shouldn't be, I guess. But I guess what do we know in that regard? But I mean, it's hard. When I look at this segment, it's their first meeting, and you got the best of the Kurt Angle character. Austin up giving people what they want, and I think that's the thing back then. It was like, what would this character do in that situation? And WWE were quite good at that. Like, how many times these days you're like, oh, that was kind of sucks. Like, why do they have them do that or whatever? But back then it seems like though most of the characters stayed true to who they were, and as you see for Austin, he did throughout the night.
It was, and there's a lot more of this moving forward, which we will get into. So the next match we had was Chris Jericho versus X-Pac, and my word for word, my note is, yay, time for some actual wrestling, because I was getting a bit bored of the bit nothing, and I thought this did have potential. Jericho was out as a clear babyface. Fans really seemed into what he was doing. Match was made after X-Pac started attacking him backstage with weapons. And at the time, I sort of when I watched this as it was going on the network earlier today, I was a bit like, all right, should this not be a weapons match? And then as I get onto later, I think they did this well because they played up how I think Jericho wins this match because it's not anything to do with weapons. He is the better wrestler of the two. X-Pac can only sort of get the advantage when he brings weapons and the nunchucks into it, which I don't think is a bad story. It's not too dissimilar to the one we got at All Out this
Moxley
month when Moxley, and it was Moxley when they went on the outside, he was in control. But when it came to the wrestling in the inside of the ring, MJF was the one with the upper hand. So I think that's actually not a bad story. And that was the one going through this match, which I did like. Go on.
I agree and disagree. So there's a part of me that's like, I mean, I liked it in the fact that the actual match was watchable. But you look at the talent involved, though. I think I expected a bit more. Although it was good, and the thing with Jericho in this era is that there was a lot of fast pace, and WWE is still trying to partner him with the right people. Yeah, he's coming off, I think, working with Triple H earlier in the year, and then I can't even remember what he did at SummerSlam. Was it Benoit? Yeah. So it's like the Xbox feud is a bit like the Kane with the coffee that he had at the time. It's like, for what? Xbox just started attacking him. Okay, fine. X-Pac, yeah, he's kind of ninja-y, so the nunchucks, but not really as well. That's not really his bag. And I think at this point as well, yeah, Jericho was getting amazing reactions. You're right, the crowd were hella into him. But I don't think X-Pac had a rich history with weapons to suggest that would be the dynamic. And he didn't. And also, I think a lot of people in this time would have probably said, you could argue X-Pac was the better worker. I know that we look at that now and probably think, oh no, but there was a long time where X-Pac was certainly considered the yardstick. If you were coming into WWE, and many people have said this, Vince McMahon would have them go work with him, and if X-Pac gave them the seal of approval, then they're all good. If he didn't,
he's the what we've now sort of learned is the Dolph Ziggler role, I guess. When people get called up from NXT. A lot of them, first feud, first match with Dolph. I presume it's a similar thing. They know Dolph can have a good match. If you're going to have a good match with X-Pac, have a good, and you could say a sort of similar thing for Dolph. And I think that is an important role to have. And it is crazy, as you say, to think, looking back on it, that people would have said Jericho was the better worker at the time. But going into this one, Jericho tries to take X-Pac for the bell. He goes to the outside. Typical heel shenanigans. Back and forth offense as we start this one off. Very sort of cruiserweight style match. X-Pac played the heel well. He knew what he was doing. People can say he had go away heat. Whatever he had heat. You can't deny that. And he knew how to piss the crowd off. He took control, taunted for too long when he's going for a Bronco Buster, allowing Jericho to hit a powerbomb. Jericho got control and hit a Bronco Buster of his own, which got a massive pop. X-Pac then went to the outside, got the nunchuck. Jericho ducks and tries to roll him up for the 2. X-Pac then gets a low blow behind the referee's back, straight into an X-Factor. X-Pac then goes for a move off the top. Jericho taps him out here, catches him, taps him out with the Walls of Jericho. This is the first time that X-Pac had lost in quite some time. And I think I was doing some research on this. A lot of people were surprised, actually, that he did lose, because at the time he wasn't doing jobs on pay-per-view for many people. After the match, we had X-Pac attack Jericho with the chucks again, like we said at the beginning match, to get his heat back. It was the best match on the card so far for me by far. Still wasn't amazing, but I mean, to think about it, it was still a decent match.
Yeah, that's a fair summary. And as we saw with the after the match shenanigans, it was the vehicle to get them to the next one, which I think is No Mercy. And I think they end up having a cage match on Raw along the way as well. So it was obviously like a chapter in the story as opposed to the finale. And I liked it that it made sense. Jericho kept the hold on too long. As a result, X-Pac's annoyed and nunchucks him after the affair, and keeps things going. So the bad blood builds, but it's kind of organic. So I was fine with it.
It was as we said earlier, the best match on the card thus far, which, to be fair, I think you and I could have had the best match on the card if we went on in this position.
I don't know.
Before this. Don't know about that. Maybe not after my lockdown cardio. That need to work on my cardio. So in between this and the next match, we had Angle backstage talking to Commissioner Foley. You spoke earlier about Foley and Angle and their comedy. This was funny, fun back and forth. Foley says he's going to make Angle and Triple H a no DQ match, which great. Rock was then in his locker room preparing for his match, and you just have Stone Cold walk in, and whenever you have those two in the same room, you can. And I want to coin a phrase in The Rock. You can genuinely feel the electricity. You just feel that they've got chemistry between them. And they stare each other down. Rock shakes his hand and says, "Welcome back." Austin says he hasn't found the person that ran him over, but did say it was good to be back. Stone Cold said that even though he and The Rock were cool, it was his rental car that ran him over. So he asked who was snooping around his locker room and might have the keys. And then I'm going to let you take over this one, because we had Just Joe come in and say that he heard Stone Cold, something that Stone Cold might want to hear, and Austin just attacked him. So what were your memories of Just Joe? And for those that weren't watching at the time, what was Just Joe? What was his whole act?
Just Joe is just a little recurring character around this time frame. I think he was only around for a little while, but he kind of pops up every now and again, I think, over the course of the next year. But he would just come in and say that he'd heard a rumor. He was like the locker room gossip is who he was. And it was often Triple H. He'd come to him. During the Kurt Angle Triple H angle, he played a role quite often, saying, "Oh, I've heard this, blah, blah, blah." And I think there was one as well that was like, he wants to fight you in the parking lot. And they'd be like, "Well, Joe, like, who's been talking to you, Joe?" And he was just like, "Oh, yeah." So he was quite funny, quite a comical little character. I took a screenshot when I saw The Rock and Austin looking at each other for the first time in however long. I was going to post it on Twitter, but I haven't got around to it. It's you said it perfectly. The electricity is so obvious. Like, just the way they look at each other and like that kind of pause. I know The Rock ends up cracking like half a smile when they shake hands, but that initial look, I was just like, "Oh, this is money, isn't it? Like, it's just money." I know we know what we know now, but even looking at that in a cold light of day, it's just like, man, that looks like money. So I thought it was a really well done segment. Like I said, Austin beats the crap out of Joe, and everyone moves along nicely.
Yeah, and I can't think of a comparison between Rock and Austin. Now, I don't think that they've got those two where, I mean, they had WrestleMania matches across 3 WrestleManias, 6 years from the first to the last. And you can't think, if they did that now, where every other WrestleMania, everyone would be like, "Oh, we're getting bored of this, we're getting bored of this." But they just had new stuff, new dynamics, and they just made it work. And I just don't think that they've been able to capture that, as we said, that electricity with 2 people probably since.
Did you say 6 years? Did
15, you? 4 years. Sorry, 4 years. Apologies. 4 years.
There you go.
15.
Come on, mate. Don't test me on my rock knowledge. No, that's the thing. You're right. Like, and people would have said at some point, I don't know, Hogan Warrior or Hogan Savage. Like, there's been big stars in the companies at the same time. Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. But man, even CM Punk and Cena to a degree, but not really. Nothing has touched the kind of star power, how over Rock and Austin were, and more importantly than that, the chemistry they had together. So, 15, 17, 19, man, what a stretch that is. And I mean, like you've just said, there is nobody that you can compare. You're lucky to get two of them in a lifetime, let alone in their primes at the same time. It was just magic. That's the only way to describe it. And I honestly don't know how WWE can ever get there again. You have to hope that they can. And, a lot of that is talent. A lot of that is booking them right and the circumstances. But, man, for me personally as a fan, I think I wouldn't have the affinity that I have for wrestling today if it wasn't for that period and those two, because that is something that you just have to. I implore anyone to kind of watch Raw from like 98 to 2002 and just enjoy, because like them two at the top of the card is just a beautiful thing.
I mean, they are fantastic. And we got our first super chat here from Patel16, who says, "The British are coming. The British are coming."
Come on in.
We're here. We're here.
Come on, the Brits.
We are.
Hey.
I mean, it must be an honour for you to be sharing the screen with top British journalist in the UK.
Well, where is he?
He's there.
Where?
Oh. Never mind.
You got all John Cena on me. Can't see no one over there, mate.
Funny one. All right, and if you guys want to get a super chat in, let us know. We will answer your questions, comments, anything that you want us to talk about. We will talk about from this show or wrestling at that period during this period. So next we had another good wrestling match. Hardy Boyz defeating Edge and Christian in a steel cage match. This
Very
one
good.
went just over 13 minutes. This was good. The rules took me out of it.
Because you mean the elimination rules?
So I was confused watching this. Had to go back a few times because I think even commentary were confused. So there's a strange rule where you can win by pinfall submission and then escaping the cage. Which, I mean, escaping the cage during a steel cage match for me shouldn't be a way to finish it. But whatever. So both members of the team had to be outside. So if one member goes over, they can't come back in. But commentary weren't sure of that. They were like, can he come back in? Can't he come back in? They were saying that he can't come back in. And then they were saying, no, he can. He just can't get in. It was confusing. It took me out of it a little bit because I was more focusing on, hey, what are the rules as opposed to the match at hand, I guess, and the four extremely talented and extremely over men who were in the ring at this time.
Look, they couldn't miss. You could put those guys in any match, and you're going to get a good match. Like you said, it was a little bit convoluted. I remember like Hardy being on the outside. Jeff on the outside, and it's like, before he actually goes to do Whisper in the Wind, which I don't think it was even called Whisper in the Wind then, but as we know it now,
they said it. I think Michael Cole said it. Yeah.
Oh, all right, that's cool then. And yeah, it was like, is he in the match then? I don't really know what's going on here. So it was a bit of a cluster in that regard, because as soon as you do that, like, both members have to get out of the cage. It makes it a weird dynamic. Like, well, why wouldn't you just, I don't know, you just wait for one to, I don't know. It's a confusing formula. But the action that we actually saw, like, I think the superplex on Matt Hardy from like essentially the top of the cage was brutal. There was just a lot of great action. 4 extremely talented workers. I still marvel at the way Christian just moves from spot to spot. Like, his ring awareness and his ring, like in the ring general, is just so understated. It really is. So yeah, like, again, like in this period of time, and it sucks when we look at the tag division now with no disrespect to
what tag division.
Well, we know there's talented people like the Street Profits and whatnot, but I mean, it's pretty bare. It's pretty bare.
Yeah.
But in this day and age, like, the combinations you can put together and get magic. But I dare say no combination was greater than the Hardy Boyz and Edge and Christian.
I mean, I think you won't find too many people arguing with that. In terms of the action in the ring, pretty much brawling straight away. You can tell these two teams did love working together because they were just fantastic. Hardy's took control early. Cool spot where Christian was sat actually on the top rope, leaning back against the cage. Then Hardy Boyz hit a poetry in motion. Pretty early on, Jeff standing on top of the cage, looking to make a dive, and then Edge pushes him off from the top of it. Of course. And then, of course, he takes a lovely bump to the floor because that's what Jeff Hardy does. And then seeing him in 2020 move around the ring, you can probably see why he might not be the smoothest when he took bumps like that. Matt Hardy goes to escape. Edge and Christian run up, hit him with a massive suplex from the top of the cage. Edge covers him. He kicks out at 2. Jeff Hardy keeps trying to re-enter, and that's where we spoke about earlier, the rules not being 100% clear, which was a bit annoying for me. He then attacks the ref and got the key to re-enter the match, which I thought worked. Would have been nice if commentary knew sort of going in. He couldn't go in legally, so the ref would try to stop him, and then he had to attack him to get him. Christian goes to the outside to get a chair, proceeds to lock the cage after hitting Hardy with the door, and then and then Edge and Christian hit the poetry in motion on Hardy, who was sandwiched sort of facing the ropes, facing the cage in between that and the ropes, which was a very cool spot. He was bloodied up. He hit a comeback spot. Tried to climb over, but Edge and Christian chase after him. Jeff Hardy then hits Christian with a ladder, knocking him off the cage, leaving it just to Edge and Matt Hardy in the ring. Jeff then climbs on top of the cage using a ladder, as we said earlier, surprise, surprise, hitting Edge and even his brother with an awesome corkscrew moonsault. I mean, it was fantastic, which obviously the whisper in the wind. As Christian tries to get back in, Lita runs down, hits a Hurricane Rana off the ladder to the outside. Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy then hit Edge with a concerto when they're all on top of the cage. They drop down and win. It wasn't the same craziness as TLC, which is good. Because what I mean by that is I'm happy they didn't try and top it. Because I don't think you can top that, especially a month afterwards. So I think they definitely did the right thing by having a lot of cool spots, but not going over the top as to try and outdo themselves. It was still very fun. Both teams were incredibly over at the time. So Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy are your tag champions. A lot of people thought they would have won the month prior, being in Carolina, but they won here. Other than the slight issue with the rules and the lack of clarity, I really liked this match. I thought it was great. And as we said, going into it, we probably could have guessed that this would have been one of the top matches on the card just by looking at it on paper.
I think Vince hates a hometown win. He hates it.
He does.
Yeah. It's I mean, I gotta say, Hardy barely got caught with his whisper in the wind. Like he eats a lot of Matt doing that. That must have hurt really bad. I think the action was what you would expect. It was fast paced, really good, believable stuff in the sense that these are guys that you know are going to take risks and go to the nth degree to get the win. And that's what they're always trying to do, is just hurt their opponent to get the win. It's not just spots for spots' sake. So I enjoy it. I always enjoyed watching them work. Like I said, to me, that's the golden era. I keep saying it's like a golden age of everything, but it's a golden age of tag team wrestling because of the amount of quality teams and the scenarios they were put in. They were given chances to shine like this. I don't know the last real TLC match we had for tag teams that was like either on a normal pay-per-view or WrestleMania or a Raw or SmackDown, whatever. In this era we had loads. We had a few. Even a ladder match or a cage match. There aren't many for the tag team division. They're pretty reserved. So I think you look at the quality in this match. 4 world champions it would turn out to be, if you're going to count ECW for Matt Hardy. Which we should. And so 4 world champs there. It just tells you all the quality that there was. And to see this really in their early embers, for all intents and purposes, Edge and Christian have kind of only been on the main roster for like 2 years at this point. So yeah, it was. I mean, like I said, I could sit here and kind of talk about all the great things that Edge and Christian and the Hardys have done, but I mean, really, this is par for the course. But it still was very, very good.
100% agree. After this match, we had Steph backstage. Stone Cold Steve Austin approaches her, asks where her husband is. Steph says he's talking to Foley. She then gives in the hat he wore at Survivor Series when he was run over. Then Stone Cold sarcastically says he can go home now because he doesn't know who run him over, but he's got the hat that he was wearing.
That's a weird memento to give someone. Really is.
It was just hilarious, his reaction when he was like, "Oh, fantastic, I can go home now." Well, that was brilliant. She says that Shane knows who ran him over and says the video package clearly shows it wasn't her, Triple H, Linda, or Vince. Stone Cold says that if he's learned anything, it's that he can't trust anyone in this place. After that, we had Triple H and Mick Foley in another one of those funny backstage segments. He and Foley said they've never seen eye to eye, but have been bonding a lot recently. This was months after Triple H had retired Foley. It was as we said earlier, another very funny segment, another just Mick Foley being hilarious, Triple H being funny. It was good, and it built up the semi-main event that we got later on. So just for that, we had Eddie Guerrero defeating Rikishi. Well, no, we didn't actually. We had Rikishi. Why? We'll get onto the finish of this match because it annoyed me. So we had Rikishi and Eddie Guerrero in this one. Seemed like more of a promotion for China's Playboy issue that was coming out the following day. They hyped that up a lot. It was pretty much the focal point of the feud, which I guess if you're going into mainstream sort of media, probably not the worst idea. Eddie took control of the match early, tries to bail to the outside. China tells him to be a man and gets him back in the ring. And I've written here, say what you want about the stink face and Rikishi in the ring, but he was over, and the stink face was over. A lot of people say, oh, he wasn't great, but it was over, and you can't deny that. China saves Eddie from the move. Rikishi hits Eddie with a bonsai drop, but China gets in the ring, sort of stops the count, and asks the referee nicely to stop counting, which was just, all right. And funnily enough, this isn't my only issue with the refereeing, I guess, in this match, because we then had Rikishi go to the outside, stare China down. And what I did like was China get back in his face and just stare him down, like not like it was a man on a woman violence like we'd see. It just was like two athletes staring off, which was a nice touch. Rikishi then hit China with a super kick, and the match just ends. That's it. China's not in the match. It is Eddie Guerrero versus Rikishi. So why did the match end? Rikishi then hits her with a bonsai drop. Eddie gets his title and checks on her. This wasn't great at all. The match was poor. The ending just didn't make sense. It's not like it was bad. It just didn't make sense. I wasn't a fan of this. How about you, Alex? What are you going to try and, from your loving period of WWE, the time that you love it, you're going to try and defend this this finish, or are you in agreement that it was not great?
I'm not going to defend the finish. I don't think the match itself was awful. It just wasn't good for the talent involved. Like when you look at someone like Eddie Guerrero, right? Like there was a spot in there where Rikishi's trying to do a Samoan drop on him, and he has to do it again because Eddie Guerrero takes it like a back body drop almost. It almost turns into like a cutter because Rikishi rotates too early, and they just didn't have good chemistry. Like they just didn't. I don't think WWE wanted to go back to the well with these two, and sometimes it happens. It's not really. I think it's the same for The Undertaker and The Rock. They don't have great chemistry, but stand alone, they're two of the greatest you've ever seen. So it does just happen. For me here, like, there's a lot of things in play. You've got the fact that the main story really is Eddie Guerrero's turning and kind of the relationship between him and China, which is clearly like toxic, unhealthy, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
The commentary makes a big point about him getting his title before checking on China. JR's going mad saying, well, hang on, like, it's not going anywhere. Why don't you check on China first? So, like, there's a lot of – really, they're trying to get that story further rather than, the box office smash that is Rikishi and Eddie Guerrero. So, I think they've done that, and they've kind of sacrificed the good story in the process because the finish is not good. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't help anyone, and
no one's really, more over.
No, like I said, you could see it. I couldn't remember this match before watching it, and I'm watching it. I'm thinking this screams DQ. Like hardly anybody beat Rikishi clean in this era. Hardly anyone, and Eddie Guerrero wasn't going to be losing the belt because the belt was like a central theme of the power struggle within the relationship of Eddie Guerrero and China. So you just knew he wasn't losing it. you knew Rikishi wasn't getting beat, and you're like, oh, okay. And that to me is always a bit of a, well, I know I'm not going to get a definitive outcome here, so it's hard to really get invested. And then when they give you the finish they gave you, man, just sucks. Like I said, we could have done the notes of what happened after and where we got to, and that'd have been it, really. That's the most interesting thing that happened.
100%. Yeah, it wasn't great. And compared sort of what we know afterwards about where Rikishi was headed, definitely wasn't the right thing for him to be doing.
They didn't know that. They didn't know that then. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a late decision. And like you're saying, it should have been Kurt Angle all along, you said earlier. That's fine. You're probably right. It would have served him better, especially with some of the things he went on to do in his career. Yeah. But they didn't know that because they'd made the angle just because they had to. Like the days before Survivor Series, they're like, "Oh damn! Like he needs the surgery on his neck. We're gonna have to do something." That happens, and then you're left with, we'll think about who'll be the culprit later on. And then when they get there, in fairness, they're probably looking at Kurt Angle and thinking, he's already arrived in the main event scene. Do we really need to give him this? And they're thinking, well, we can try and make someone else with Rikishi. And Will Gavin was talking about this on our radio show yesterday. Technically, it makes sense that he would help The Rock because they are actually family and stuff, right? So, like, the notion is kind of there, just the execution is awful. And, like, it's it just didn't work. Like, no, I don't think people wanted to see the back of, no pun intended, dancing Rikishi. They loved him. There wasn't a need to see a switch up. They weren't ready for it, and it wasn't the switch up that they wanted. So I think all in all, it was just a bad decision. And I think from here, Rikishi is just the utility strong player. Like, whatever feud he goes into, there's going to be some shenanigans for him to not win. It got a bit boring, I must admit.
No, I do agree. And as you were alluding to, wasn't the good execution of that angle. But we will get on to talking about that. So after that match, Taker was interviewed. He said when he was away, people forgot he's the big dog and he runs the yard. So not sure where we've heard that one more recently. And then Trish tries to comfort Kurt Angle backstage. She says she'll be there for Kurt if he needs. Kurt has an epiphany and runs off. Speaking of, Triple H defeats Kurt Angle. Next match, we had Kurt Angle coming out to cut a promo saying it's Steph's birthday. He asked fans to join in a happy birthday chant. Again, totally cringy, totally corny, but because it's Kurt Angle, it works.
And King was singing it with him, which really made me laugh. He was like, "Come on, JL." I loved it.
It shouldn't work. You write this down. You're like, semi-main event, no DQ, blood feud. First thing that someone does comes out and sings happy birthday. It shouldn't work, but because it's Kurt Angle, it just does. Yeah. So in this match, Kurt goes straight for Triple H exposed ribs and takes control. Triple H then back body drops him to the outside. When they are Triple H goes for a DDT and Kurt kicks him in the nuts. They then argue with special guest referee Mick Foley. Kurt does the same after German, argues with Mick Foley about why the pin. Yeah, I know. After some time, they go to the outside. Triple H does a dramatic sell, which I always love, of the Irish whip to the corner, flings himself over. Then after a back and forth, Triple H hits Kurt with a German with a just standard suplex on the outside. They then fight over the announce table, and Triple H sets him up for the pedigree, which is a nice callback to the SummerSlam spot from the match, the WWE title match with The Rock, which I did like that, nice callbacks in matches. Angle blocks that attempt with a low blow, and then belly-to-belly suplexes him while standing on one announce table through the one next to it, which was another great spot. Back in the ring, Kurt goes for a moonsault. Nobody's home. Triple H then hits a one-arm pedigree but isn't able to cover him. Steph comes in to check on Triple H. He tells her to, he says, just choose. She then boots Kurt in the nuts with a very dramatic penalty kick. Has to be said. Triple H then musters the courage to use both arms for pedigree about a minute after he couldn't use he could only use one to get the win. After the match, Steph looks torn, so Triple H grabs her and gives her a weird, aggressive kiss. It just wasn't was weird. What do you think about this match, Alex? And what do you think about the post-match angle afterwards?
I've got a few thoughts, Louis. My first one, and there's something that I didn't like. So in the video package, and it's one thing that was like a component of the feud. You know, how they kind of chronicalize it for the weeks leading up to it. And there was like a whole bit of Triple H saying that Kurt Angle was sensitive and basically insinuating that he's gay, right? As if that was like a really bad thing. Like, you would never see that today. Never, ever would they dream of doing something like that.
And quite rightly not.
Yeah, of course. And that's what I mean. It kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. And I'm watching it and I was like, man, was it really like that? Like, because like the way Angle gets incensed at the mere notion that he might be gay. You know, like if really any man in this day and age would laugh that shit off. You'd be like, all right, well, I'm not gay though. Like, so it wouldn't matter, would it? But it's like back then, for some reason, WWE were portraying it like there's nothing worse than being called gay. And I get it. It was like a different time. You know, it's like when you're in school and people say it and stuff like that. It's different. It's different. But the way it was used, I just thought, man, that sucks. Didn't like it. On to the actual match. I think Triple H obviously pops a blood capsule after he takes the release suplex, right? After he takes that, the belly to belly, he's lying there. Like, it cuts away, it's textbook WWE style. Comes back, and all of a sudden, there's loads of blood coming out of his mouth. They're insinuating that there's internal bleeding, and you know the ribs are that bad, Louis, right? And then he gets to the pedigree. He can only do one arm. And I'm like, okay. And then there's two things that really bother me. One, he calls Stephanie into the ring. That's what you missed out. He calls her.
Okay.
He actually says, like, get in. And then he says, you have to choose, right? And Stephanie's looking like, it's just all weird. The way Stephanie's like, what? And he's like, you have to choose me or him. And then she does choose by kicking Kurt. But they've already established this before the match that there isn't a choice to make, so it's a bit of a weird thing to ask her to do. Like, just ask her to kick him. Like, I don't know. It was a bit weird. She does kick him, and then all of a sudden Triple H is so galvanized that his ribs are repaired, and he doesn't like. It's one thing if he'd like summoned the power and he was like, ah, do you know what I mean, and lifted him up. But man, he hooked those shit so quick. I was like, come on. I was annoyed with that. And then, like you said, the post-match thing, I mean, it is what it is, right? Like, I guess they're just trying to further the story, and it's like the dynamic between Triple H and Steph, like, where they're trying to go with that, fine. It's kind of like my territory kind of thing, I guess. But I felt like the match was great and intense and had, like, you know, nice pacing as well.
Yeah.
There were some misfits there for me. And it wasn't what it could have been.
Yeah, it was. I think, again, like we said before, considering the talent in the ring, could this have been better? Probably. It probably could have been. I was a bit disappointed. It wasn't offensive again, by any means. It was still a good match, just dragged in parts of me. I mean, Triple H match could have put my house on the fact it would have been the longest match on the card, and it did feel like it. It got to be said. Then we had a massive angle.
It actually was.
It was big. We had Shane McMahon coming down to the ring for a promo, and he's going to basically reveal who the. Hang on, my monitor has decided to turn off. All right, there we go.
No.
He's basically decided he's going to reveal who the person behind the who ran Stone Cold Steve Austin over looking at the footage. He shows it. It's not great for my money. He shows Steve Blackman, who he, again, as we mentioned earlier, had that SummerSlam match. He mentions, shows a video of him running over Ken Shamrock from earlier in the year, or about a year ago at this point. Says it's clear evidence that that it was him who ran over Stone Cold. Then Blackman comes down to the ring. Shane scurries out. Stone Cold comes out. And regardless of what we thought about that segment, that pop when Stone Cold Steve Austin's music hit, the glass shattered. It was just huge. He comes down, stares a hole through Blackman, hits him with a stunner. Shane McMahon fantastically plays his job very well. Goes and gets the beer, celebrates Stone Cold. He then hits him with the beer, and there is nothing but Stone Cold stunner is fantastic. But when you see the beer flying out of their mouth when they're hit with the stunner, it just doesn't get better than that. And then we had him hitting with 3 stunners each time and then head to the back. It was a great way to reintroduce him. I thought the segment got significantly better once Stone Cold was involved. Yeah, it was a nice way to reintroduce him, and doing it on pay-per-view definitely gave it a big feel. What were your, thoughts of the whole angle, the whole Stone Cold angle, and then of this specific segment?
So for this segment, what they needed, without fail, was the glass hit out of nowhere for the pop and some stunners. That's it.
Yeah,
that's what they needed. That's what we got. It was textbook WWE in the sense that they're teasing that you might actually find out or get an inkling onto who's done it, and then you don't at all. But I thought it was quite funny, Shane McMahon trying to throw Blackman under the bus, and King was selling it so great. He was like, well, there it is. Like, it's the proof. Like, it's undisputable. And JR was going, come on. So it was. We should mention that King's back out at this point, by the way. Cole would. That was so funny as well. King's music just hits, and Cole was like, "Oh, I'm going then, I guess." So yeah, I think for me, Austin, as far as reintroduction goes, and like what he could realistically probably do on this night, it's fine. Served its purpose. It did, like I said, you had to get those 2 things in. You got them in. The angle as a whole, and I've said this recently, I love mystery angles, and this one involving the hottest person in the business ever, and something as like I've never seen a man get run over in wrestling. Like, I know that it's probably happened in like Memphis and stuff, like back in the day with Jerry Lawler and whatnot. But I personally hadn't seen it as a 12-year-old, so I was like, whoa. Like, Jesus, someone just ran over Steve Austin. And then, like, because I didn't read dirt sheets or anything, because I'm 12 and my phone certainly doesn't have internet. Yeah. I'm like, well, when's he coming back? And then like months go by without him. Do you know what I mean? So you're like, Jesus, this is like, I want to know who's done it, and it's going to be massive when he gets back. So when obviously we just mentioned it earlier. I don't need to retread it again. It wasn't executed well. They obviously left it too late to figure out what they were going to do with it. And then when they threw it together, it just wasn't good. It was so bad that they had Austin and Rock work WrestleMania 6 months later, no mention. No mention of the tie-in that somebody had actually run over Steve Austin in the interim. They just went to, in actual fact, it's going to be that Deborah is the manager of The Rock. Anyway, I won't get into that either. But, the angle, as most mystery storylines unfortunately do in WWE, fell really flat. And that pains me to say, because there's a lot of them that I get invested in, and I can't actually, to hand now, think of one that's had a great payoff. Not one. Yeah. No. Not one. And that's pretty despicable to say. The
hacker was great.
Yeah. I mean, it's still happening, isn't it? Kind of. Yeah. Never ending. I don't know. It's just, for me, the execution was bad, but at the end of the day, Austin still managed to come back and get hot. So no damage done. It's just always that what could have been, right? That's what we find ourselves saying so often. But in this instance, for this segment, I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it then, and I don't hate it now.
Exactly. I mean, it could have been worse. I'd say
that should be our bar. Well, it could have been worse.
Exactly. Right? It could have been worse. It wasn't offensive. They're playing this. So next we've got WWE title match, the main event. Rock, Kane, Taker, and Benoit. They're playing this up as Rock's biggest challenge. He's interviewed by Frosted Tip Head Michael Cole, my favorite version of Michael Cole. He questions if Kane, and I quote, wants some matches to light his big red ass on fire. He talks about nipples, testicles, and asses. It was a typical Rock promo. Again, the corniness that shouldn't work but does. He says that there's no chance that any of the other 3 men walk out with the WWE title, and walks off. Everyone comes out to the ring.
Sorry, he says those things, and he doesn't even crack a smile. He says them with like so intently, doesn't he? Like with this weird.
Be able to interview him.
Well, that's it. Like, he says it with this weird intensity that makes it work. Like, I don't know if you could do it any other way, but then he was like, I'm going to shove their heads so far up their asses, they're going to use their nipples as eyes. And I was like, how does that? But yeah, either way, I was just like, yeah, well, The Rock's saying it's so cool. Like you said, his delivery and just how cool he was, man. Like, it was just, he couldn't miss. He really couldn't.
He couldn't. So the action breaks off into pairs early. Rock working with Kane, Taker with Benoit. Rock and Taker then come out on top and square off individually, but the other two men come in, and that showdown is saved, which great idea. Taker and Kane then fight in the ring while Rock and Benoit fight through the crowd. So issue number one, why are they fighting through the crowd? You can't get a pinfall in the crowd, right? It wasn't a Falls Count Anywhere match. So surely they're just basically going, right, we're going to fight in the crowd for no reason. We're going to risk Kane or The Undertaker pinning each other and not being able to break it up. There's literally no goal you can get. No, it doesn't serve a purpose by broadening the crowd. So for me, it just was like, all right, that's stupid.
I think like the thing with Benoit and Rock is that they had been kind of feuding on and off for like 3 or 4 months. So you could argue maybe that things spilled over. I know that sounds really cheesy, but you could argue that. And isn't it like Benoit's kind of trying to escape him in a little way? Well, not like that, but they brawl over the barricades and stuff. So it's not like, I don't know. Like, I hear what you're saying though. Like, really, the goal of the match should always be to win. Like, everything a person does in a match should be with the view to beating the other person. But I mean, I didn't hate it. It didn't take me out of it. Like, because if it spills over like that, but then if you're Rock as champion and you leave 2 guys to fight in the ring, really, that's not sensible, is it? They could because the pinfall could have gone down without him, and then their uncle lost the title.
Exactly. Kane and Taker, who might be I wrote this note. Kane and Taker might be 2 of the best characters over the last 30 years, but they had no in-ring chemistry together.
Oh no, none is harsh.
Very little.
Yeah,
and I think Bruce Pritchard, who is Mr. WWE shill, has said, you put them in the ring together and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, it should. Like, you look at, like, they're 2 athletic big men with, like, a whole lot of story behind them. You just think, this should work. I can't, as much as I kind of want to defend both of them, I can't really. Because I can't point to A match or B match and say, well, no, because look, they had this classic here because they never did, and they had so many chances. In fact, you'd argue maybe their best work was when Kane was like the SmackDown champion, maybe, what was it, 2009, 2010? Like, they had a feud then. Yeah, like they had a feud. They had a feud then, which was probably their best stuff. In this era, not so much. And like I said earlier, Undertaker and Rock didn't have great chemistry either. The Rock had chemistry with Benoit, which is the saving grace, really. But
I mean, we'll talk about that.
I liked all 4 men.
Yeah,
like for individually in the match, but I'm not sure the action ever really got into top gear. Like, if we think back to SummerSlam 2017, I think it's 17, with like Lesnar, Reigns, Strowman, and Samoa Joe. That is how a Fatal 4-Way main event for the title needs to go. Just chaos, right? Yeah. This was just a bit like, it just felt like a kind of 15-minute brawl. Like, not a lot really happened, and the finish bugs me, but I'll let you get onto that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about it. Chris Benoit comes back into the ring, attacks Taker. Kane goes to the outside and brings Rock back into the ring. There was a lot of this, and we saw this recently with the NXT title match, the 4-Way. I don't like when there's a 4-Way and it's a lot of one-on-one stuff, and this was a lot of one-on-one stuff, 2 people on the outside. Taker throws Kane onto the barricade, comes back into the ring to help the Rock attack Kane. Drops Benoit on the barricade. They throw him to the outside, start wrestling together. Taker goes to old school, but Rock throws him off the top rope and then throws him to the outside. Kane comes back in and clotheslines the Rock. Then we have Rock pushing him into El Hebner. Rock then capitalizes with a DDT, but there's no one to count the pin. And behind the referee's back, we have Chris Benoit hitting Taker with a steel chair, and Hebner wakes up to count the pin. So, 1, 2, 3, Benoit is your champion. Foley comes down and takes the title off Benoit. JR says the match restarted because Taker's feet were underneath the ropes.
Again, by the way, Foley's done it again. He did it to Benoit at another pay-per-view.
Second time in 3 months, I think. Why? Because it's a no DQ match. Your feet can be. So you're telling me you can whack someone over the head with a chair? That's legal. That's fine. But their feet are underneath the ropes. No. Don't take the piss. That's illegal.
I guess it's Foley's discretion in kayfabe. Like, I guess he's the commissioner and makes the rules, but it didn't make like. I don't know why they did that twice with Benoit in the space of a few months. Did they think that would help him? Like, did they think that he was like, as a heel, being the nearly man that's been for all intents and purposes screwed? There's been a lot worse finishes in WWE history that have been allowed, that have run. So it makes precious little sense. But yeah, there you go.
And I mean, it was. I understand this if they then intended to put the title on him in the next couple of months, and it was like, let's delay it. He'll turn babyface and put title on him. He didn't have the title on him for like 3.5 years, 4 years. Crazy. It didn't work. That didn't work for me at all. Then all three guys turned on Benoit, approached him at the top of the ramp, which the crowd were in for. Rock and Benoit had a nice back and forth, and I was saying, watching this, not knowing, obviously, knowing that they'd been feuding, but if I looked at this in isolation, the Rock and Benoit would have been the big match going forward for me. That would have been the one that we mentioned earlier, No Mercy being the next pay-per-view. Obviously, it wasn't what we got, but I would have probably liked to have seen Benoit and Rock in some capacity, probably in a one-on-one match. That, for me, would have been the direction that I think they should have gone in following this. We had Rock go and hit a people's elbow on Kane, or try to, and then the crowd was so into it. They were so hot for this. And then Benoit clotheslined him, which the crowd hated him for. Benoit then has Rock in the crossface. Taker makes a save. He and Kane then spill to the outside.
In the crossface forever, by the way. It was ages.
It was a long time. And then Rock just jumps up, hits Benoit with a rock bottom, and picks up the win. You had an issue with the finish. So go on, why don't you tell us what your gripe was?
I will do. Yeah, like I said, for starters, like, I always loved the crippler crossface. That is one of the last devastating finishes I can recall. That is a submission move that, if someone got put in it, you believed they could tap. There's not many of those. There's really not. And so as it breaks down, so Undertaker breaks up the submission, then Kane drags him out, and they battle back and forth. As Rock hits the rock bottom, Undertaker goes to get in and break it up. Kane, also in the match and would like to win the title, stops the Undertaker from breaking it up. And then JR kind of says in the commentary after, "Oh, Kane just didn't want. All he wanted was for Undertaker not to win the title. He didn't care if he won it, basically." I was like, "That's so stupid. It really is." Like, he would have broke it up. You would have broke it. Anyone would have in the title match. So I thought it was silly. I thought it was silly that they had that, and it didn't really go anywhere either. It's not as if that feud even really carried on. I think it quietly goes away after this. I think in fact Undertaker goes away after this for a little bit with a knee injury, if I'm not mistaken. But man, it just didn't work for me, that finish. Happy that The Rock won, of course, being the massive Rock mark that I am, but I don't think there was really anyone in that match who was ripe and primed to take the title off him anyway. So it was, again, I hate to say what I said earlier, but a bit par for the course. It kind of did what it had to do, but certainly not a memorable title defense or main event, in my opinion. It was just decent.
It was very much summed up the pay-per-view, which was not offensive, nothing bad, just wasn't anything to write home about. I wouldn't have watched this and then gone into school the next day trying to tell my friends to watch it. It wouldn't have been that pay-per-view. I wouldn't have I probably would have, if I was watching at the time, had more investment in storylines, probably would have thought some things were better, but I wasn't a major fan of this pay-per-view at all. Definitely not compared to SummerSlam the month before, which we both said was a great pay-per-view.
Yeah, well, it was, like I said, and it had standout moments that, you could, 2 or 3 that you would be like, if you look back at the end of the year, you'd be like, yeah, that was cool. After this pay-per-view, there's really not much to come away and be like, oh, there's certainly no Shane McMahon falling off a scaffold or a TLC match or, a triple threat main event, that had the talent and lived up to the standards. And it's just funny because from here, WWE, and I don't know if there's going to be spoilers for our next show or whatever, but of course, by then we understand that Rikishi has been revealed, right? And he faces Austin at No Mercy. And then you get Triple H actually goes into a feud with Benoit. So Benoit loses here and gets Triple H the winner of him and Benoit. Him and Angle. And Angle goes on to face The Rock.
Yeah.
Even though he lost to Triple H, and he wins the title. So it's like, it's hard to read in too much into what really went down, I guess.
It's almost like they probably booked this pay-per-view and then the night after decided, all right, let's book the No Mercy card, and didn't think it through. But on that note, I'll run down the No Mercy card, which the No Mercy review will not be on YouTube. This has been a bit of a one-off to give you guys a feel for what these retro reviews will look like if you head on over to Fightful Select, which you mentioned at the top of the show. Obviously, the subscription service, best way to support Fightful. And well worth your money as well. Wrestling news, exclusives, interviews, early interviews, a lot of great content over there, tons of retro reviews that predate Alex and I on the channel. So if you guys want to check that out and check out our review of No Mercy, which will be going up next month, you can do that, which features Dudley Boyz in a invitational tables match, the APA and Lita versus Test, Albert, and Trish. Chris Jericho and X-Pac again, this time in a steel cage. Right to Censor and Chyna and Billy Gunn. Rikishi and Stone Cold, as he said. William Regal defeating Naked Midian for the European title. The Conquistadors and the Hardy Boyz, obviously the Conquistadors, who no clue who they are.
Who knows?
Triple H and Benoit and Kurt Angle and The Rock. So if you guys want to check that out, head on over to Fightful Select, as I said. Subscribe over there and follow Alex McCarthy. Go on, give us the plugs. Where can people check out what you've got going on over the next couple of weeks? Sorry.
Yeah, so Alex M_Talksport is my Twitter, and that's where like the hub of everything that I do, to be honest. You'll see my interviews on Inside the Ropes moving forward for the next few months. And you will also find my written work, of course, at talksport.com/wrestling. And I have a show that airs every Monday, 7 to 9 on TalkSport 2. But as I say, Sean Ross Sapp the Yardstick, please do subscribe to Fightful. He's the guy.
He is the guy. He is a great journalist, as is Alex. So make sure you're checking out both those two. In terms of me, if you want to follow me, the Louis Dangoor on Twitter. Got an interview coming out tomorrow with Santana and Ortiz ahead of their what are they calling it? Parking lot brawl match tomorrow on Dynamite. We talk about them while they joined AEW and a lot of great stuff. So check that out. Also, that'll be on the new Wrestle 2 channel. Head on over to WrestleTalk interviews. Check out the stuff I've done before with Ric Flair, FTR, and a whole host of other names. We've also got an exclusive coming tomorrow. That'll be in the WrestleTalk news. So make sure you check that out. If you're not subscribed to Fightful and you're watching this, make sure you are. There's a Wednesday Night Warfare podcast tomorrow, immediately after NXT and AEW. The Wednesday Night Wars are back, and I'm looking forward to being cross-eyed again, trying to watch both at the same time. So that'll be on immediately after AEW and NXT with myself, Alex Pulaski, and Warren Hayes. So make sure you check that one out. And before we head off, we got one final super chat from Gorilla Press. Somebody saying, is here showing support? The All Authority will fall. Oliver's reign will come to an end. He is risen. That is a WrestleTalk storyline thing, which we'll have to explain to you another time, Alex. But thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, Alex, taking the time to do this review. Hope you all enjoyed it. And like this video if you enjoyed, and we'll see you later.
Thanks, guys.